This is the Business Owners IT Podcast with Anthony Gerasch and Ryan Carter, where tomorrow's technology meets today's conversations.
Hi, I'm Tony Gerasch.
And I'm Ryan Carter, and this is the Business Owners IT Podcast.
A podcast where we discuss tips, tricks, and solutions for business owners involving all things tech.
Drum roll. We finally got here. CIS Control 11,
Yes.
Data recovery. We've talked about backups. We've stated that backups, we can't believe that it's 11 compared to all the other controls, but we've gotten this far to show you guys how important all those controls are before you even start thinking about backing up your data. So the overview for this control is to establish and maintain data recovery practices sufficient to restore in-scope enterprise assets to a pre-incident and trusted state. So here we go, Tony. We're going to talk about data recovery, and I'm going to steal one of your sayings right here that you would say this is the first dollar spent and the last dollar used, backup. So why don't you get us started?
Yes. So isn't it remarkable that we've been through, 10 controls and now we're finally getting the backup, right? That's remarkable, guys. It's remarkable. And you could see why, because the previous 9 or the previous 10 all talk about, being able to identify, that we've had an attack, right? So how can we start backing up if we don't know what computer it's coming from or what user it's coming from? So if you look back at all the previous ones, it makes sense why it's number 11, because we need to know all that stuff prior to restoring.
Yeah,
we need to know where to look, right?
We call it right of the boom,
right?
Because you got, at some point, we've said in our industry for a while, at some point you're going to get hacked.
Yeah,
and it's all about what you do when it happens and after it happens. And now we're starting to hit what you're supposed to do after it happens,
right,
or right when it happens. So.
Yeah, maybe I'll tell you guys a quick story after we get through this, but I got a couple good ones on backup. So the key aspects, right? Automated backups, backup protection, backup frequency and retention, offline backups, right? This is all pretty basic stuff that we probably have been hearing for years, right? Regular testing, backup scope and coverage, right? So them are the key aspects. So we'll dive right into the first one, automated backups. So, yeah, that's important, right? Your backup has to back up. And I always say everything has to be backed up no matter where it sets. I don't care if it's in the cloud. I don't care if it's at Google. I don't care where it's at. It has to be backed up and it has to be automatic, right? So it has to happen on a regular cadence. Most of us, we use Datto, BCDR, Business Continuity Disaster Recovery, and most of our places are backing up every hour. They're backing up every hour, every day, 24 hours, well, typically not 24 hours. It'll back up during the normal business hours because we want to give some opportunity for the backups to actually get offsite. So, and sometimes not on the weekends, right? It just depends who the business is. If it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week business, then we're going to be backing up every hour. If it's a Monday through Friday, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, we're going to be backing up. So it's important to do that, right?
Yeah.
So automated, scheduled, defined. You have a policy, right? You build a policy around CIS. You have a policy that says when you're going to back up, what's going to be backed up, and then if there's any things that aren't going to be backed up, you write down why.
Yep, because we've already defined our systems and our users. Now let's see who's critical and what needs to be backed up for sure, and then also restore, which we're going to get to here in a minute.
Yeah, and then backup protection, right? So backup protection is you need to secure those backups, right? They can't be plugged in with the USB drive into a back of a server, right? You need something that's going to be protected, right? And it has to be encrypted. So if somebody gets a hold of your backup, they can't read it. But remember, anything that can be touched on a server, right, can be encrypted or ransomed. So for example, if you have USB drives plugged in, you're backing up your QuickBooks and somebody gets into your server or somebody gets on your network, you have access to that, it's encrypted.
Yep. That's the first thing they do is look for your backups,
right,
pause them and
right,
encrypt them.
Right. And if they can't pause them and encrypt them, then what they try to do is sit there and figure out a way to do it before they attack you. Backup frequency and retention. That's another important thing is again, you need to define this, but, are your dailies turning into weeklies, your weeklies turning into monthlies, your quarterlies turning into, are your monthlies turning into quarterlies, your quarterlies turning into yearly? Are we keeping it infinite? I mean, I have customers that have infinite retention. So you need to define that, what's best for your business, right? So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things too. So, this is all stuff you define in your policies, right? Offline backups. So you have to keep, you have to keep stuff offline. What happens if we have a flood? What happens if we have a fire, right? What happens if, if our hardware in our data centers that are in our business, whether it's in a closet or it's in a regular computer room, what happens if we come in and that's all gone or whatever? So you have to have an offline backup too, right? And it has to be immutable. So you need to have immutable backups, right? You need to have a backup that, that can't be touched, right?
Yeah.
So typically in our environment, we have an on-premise backup and a cloud backup.
So we've just showed you that there is a rule of thumb in the IT industry that you must have 3 copies of your data, which is the data that's live that you're using, the data that's backed up, usually locally, and then that third set of data, which is either taken off site, which we don't do very often anymore, or it's data that's put up to the cloud, which is now kind of like the safe off site. And that goes back to the immutable part about that, is when it's going up to the cloud, is the company that I'm backing up my data to in the cloud or wherever it's being stored, can they get to it from their servers, or can someone else's backup get to my backups? And that's where Tony brought up the immutable pieces, that you should not be able to see or get to other people's backups.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then regular testing. Now, we offer a service where we've been testing, but we haven't done one in a couple,
About 5 weeks.
Oh, we tested one recently?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been 5 or 6 weeks.
But, we do have the ability, and I guess I'm a little bit out of what's going on, but, we do have the ability to test backups where we will do a full function cloud setup of all your equipment in the cloud, and then working with you, we would test it up. But, regular testing your backups is recommended because you don't know what's going to happen when it comes time to restore. In addition, it gives you practice, right? Hey, when I do a full restore, a full bring up of all the stuff in the cloud, what kind of problems I'm going to run into?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if your product is something that's important to your customers to the point where you can't be down for very long, you're going to need to test your backup so that you know how fast your systems can be back up for your customers. So you could tell them, even in the sales process, be like, hey, if we go down within 2 hours, we'll be able to get you up and running again, or whatever service we provide to you will be running within X amount of time.
Yeah, and when you test your backup, you can learn about problems you're going to have. Like if we have any dual users out there, that's 2-factor authentication to get into your computers and servers. When you do a restore or a cloud restore or a restore to dissimilar hardware, whatever you're doing, what about dual? How do I get in? How do I test, right? So, or if you have software to have license keys that use MAC addresses, now when you do your testing, you'll find all these hurdles, and then you'll be able to overcome them. And once you figure out how to overcome them, then you document it. And then if you do have something happen, you're ready.
Yeah. And another one I brought up a few weeks ago in one of our CIS frameworks is that the tip of the week was encrypt, encrypt, encrypt.
Yes.
So if you're encrypting your drives, you better have those decryption keys too, because if you're going to restore from backup, you need that.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. You need to have your BitLocker keys stored and ready to go. And the same thing is true if you're encrypting data on your backup drives. So at some of our customers, right, we actually encrypt the data at rest on the actual backup device that's actually stored, right? That's actually in the computer room, right? Mm-hmm. So when it goes time to restore from that backup device, you better have your encryption key for that device.
Both of them, yeah. Yep, exactly.
Last one that they talk about is backup scope and coverage, right? Again, this is what needs to be backed up. I'm of the mindset that everything needs to be backed up no matter where it lies. So if it's in the cloud, it needs to be backed up. It's just your data on somebody else's server. If it's in, on your computer, if it's, QuickBooks Online, if it's, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Word, everything has to be backed up, no matter where it sits.
Yep, so, understandable. So I'm sitting around the campfire getting warm. It's time for a story, Tony.
Yeah, so, I could tell a little bit of a story here. Once we had a customer that was getting ransomware, and it started out with an email that went to a salesman. Salesman couldn't open it, right? So he forwarded it to another email to another salesman. That salesman couldn't open it. He forwarded it to another salesman, all in the same company, right? So, we got to the place, and first thing is we stopped it. We stopped the attack from happening before we started, before we, and then we started to restore. So we stopped it. We thought we had it done. The first salesman, we identified him, we shut his computer down, and we started restoring files. And again, this goes back to knowing what you're doing and all your fuses. And all of a sudden, the data that we're restoring is getting re-encrypted. So then we go to another. He said, well, did anybody else get this email? Oh, no, I forwarded it to this guy. So we had to stop that, right? So we get this guy going down and stop it. And this time we didn't start restoring, but we still see his stuff getting encrypted. And, finally we found out the third person that had it, took his computer down, right? And then we were able to restore the data and started getting people back up pretty quickly. But it was one of those things is where we rushed so fast that we really didn't identify where it was coming from.
Yeah, you want to help fix the problem, and everyone's kind of scrambling to keep working. So you want to get it done, and you think you found the problem. So let's knock it out. And come to find out, the gentleman just missed a piece of his story of telling you that I sent it on to so-and-so. Oh, yeah, and then I sent it to so-and-so.
Yeah, they weren't so forthcoming, right? So good thing he didn't send it to any of his friends to see if they could open on their computer at home. But it's one of those things, right? Is you got to know, and just think if it was, if you got ransomed during COVID, right? There's a potential that if you didn't know where all your computers were, right, and all your users, right, in a big organization, that you could have had this happen through a VPN, right? Be able to identify, right? So again, it's very important for to know the previous 10 when you're trying to recover.
Yeah, and what was good is that you did have backups of their computers that were getting ransomed. So that's a good thing, and it was a good choice by the business owner to make sure that they had those backups.
Yeah, and this would have been, it would have been before we had Datto. We were just basically still backing up to a third-party device, and it was still immutable to a certain extent, but not nearly as secure.
No, yep, we did do a step up when we moved to Datto, that's for sure. So that's going to bring us to our tip of the week. And the first one is I did bring it up earlier, so I'm just going to throw this part back in there, is make sure you have your data in 3 places. Yeah. So again, we're going to have it on our production data, what's being used at the time, a backup usually locally, and then somewhere offsite, either in the cloud or locked away somewhere offsite. But also you want to just make sure that your backups are working. Someone has to monitor this. You can't just set it and forget it. It's just not how it works. We have someone that looks at it daily for us to let us know what's going on. We get alerted, but we also go and look to make sure that those backups are working. And our pro tip of the week would be that you would test those backups. So find out if those critical systems can be up and how long it takes to get them back up. So,
Especially if you rely on your data.
Yeah.
Right. So, especially if you rely on your data, you need to, and if you have software packages that, are enterprise type packages that need to be tested too to see how they'll work should you have an event.
Yep, I agree. So.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for number 11, backup. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Business Owners IT Podcast. I hope to see you guys all next week.
And we'll see you next week where we talk about CIS Control 12, Network Infrastructure Management. We're on the downhill slide, folks.
Unique Computing Solutions. Your IT challenges solved.